welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi. My name is Matt.
And my name is James.
And we are bringing you another bonus episode in our DEVS mini-series. This week we're looking at episodes 3 and 4 of this exciting new sci-fi project from Alex Garland, which is currently airing on BBC Two, or I think it's already finished on BBC Two.
Yeah, it's on iPlayer though, so you can catch up on there if you need to. I mean, I know we are at the moment.
So we're bringing you this as a bonus episode while we get back on track with our space series. So we'll be getting back to our main series soon, but also finishing off DEVS in 2 more episodes.
Yes, I've been really enjoying this series. It's been nice to sort of like chat about a TV series a bit more as well and go properly in depth with it for once. It's a bit of a different format for us, but I've been enjoying it so far.
Yeah, and not having a clue what's going on with something as we meet to talk about it. It's a new experience.
Exactly. And because like I haven't read any of the sort of spoilers, I've been really trying hard to avoid all spoilers for this. I feel like, yeah, it could literally go anywhere at this point.
Right, let's get stuck in with episode 3, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Everyone believes Sergei committed suicide. I think it might not be true. There's stuff about Sergei you don't know.
Like what?
He was a spy.
She's had stuff like this before.
Stuff like what?
Schizophrenia.
Do not do this!
Anything that happens to her is explainable.
So episode 3 started with this crazy, like, garbled montage, didn't it? It was really weird and surreal.
Yeah, the sound was really crazy, wasn't it? It was all sort of like, I didn't know if my laptop was broken when I was watching it, because also I was watching it with my girlfriend on Zoom. So it would go through bits, and then she was like, is the sound working? I don't know. And it just kept like doing all this crazy, like muffled voices. And then it'd be really loud all of a sudden, and it would scare the crap out of me at certain points.
So what were we actually looking at there? I think we see the crucifixion again.
Yeah, that was like one of the first images, but it was a flash of lots of different scenes, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very trippy and hard to follow. I think we also saw Joan of Arc. So we saw someone being burned at a stake, and Joan of Arc is the most famous person in history to have been burned at the stake. Did you pick out anything else? Because I didn't really get any clear images apart from that.
So I was watching it with the subtitles on as well, and it actually said that at one point it was Abraham Lincoln being shown at the Gettysburg Address. I would not have got that at all if I hadn't had those subtitles on.
No, I don't know what that looks like, what the Gettysburg Address looked like. A guy talking to a crowd, I guess.
Yeah, it was really strange. But yeah, so that's apparently what that bit was. So they had that in there. They had someone being burnt at the stake. They had like a Roman army, it looked like, as well.
Really?
Yeah, there were lots of sort of soldiers. That's what I assumed it was. But as with all of these, this kind of projection image that we're seeing, they're not fully in focus. So you can just about make out what things are. But you can't hear them as well. That was the thing. Like, the sound's really clever because it's kind of like, it's frustrating to watch because you want like a clear image and clear sound. Like if you've ever streamed something and it hasn't quite streamed to the quality you want, or sort of like jitters or jutters a bit, you know how infuriating that is. And that's sort of like the feeling I got when I was watching this intro bit of the episode.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I also like the fact that it's kind of a greatest hits of history that they're going through when they're looking at, like, their first main projection is the crucifixion of Jesus, and then we've got Abraham Lincoln, Joan of Arc. It's like the Bill and Ted kind of whistle-stop tour of history.
That's brilliant. I love that as an idea, the greatest hits of history.
But then to kind of bring it back to something more realistic, do we go straight into the two of them watching Arthur Miller and Marilyn Manson having sex on it? Is that the next thing we see? That's
pretty much it. But there is one other projection in that sequence as well. There's you see Lily in the sequence putting the fuck you sign up, which we talked about in the previous episode. And that seemed a little bit out of sequence because, like you said, it's like the greatest hits of history. But then all of a sudden Lily's in the greatest hits of history. Is that going to be relevant, do you reckon? Or is it just, here's a little bit of what's going to happen in the episode?
maybe that. It also adds in a little bit of surveillance into the possible use of the DEVS project. So we talked last time, didn't we, about it's not entirely clear. Like, it seemed like Forrest had an interest in predicting the future, but the DEVS project looks backwards. And now if we're looking at Lily, we know that Forrest's, the business side, Forrest and Kenton have an interest in keeping tabs on her. So there's a bit of that is in history. It happened in the past at that moment, but it was very recent history, and there's an element of surveillance there, isn't there? Because if you can perfectly project the entirety of history, that includes just having a look at what someone did 10 seconds ago, 2 streets over. And
like you were saying, the next sort of thing we wanted to chat about, the Arthur Miller and Marilyn Monroe projection. What did you think about that? I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, I thought it was good. It was a nice bit of comic relief, but it was useful to then, what's her name? I keep forgetting her name. Is it Katie? Yeah, the kind of stuffy one. It gives her an excuse to come in, and then she's got something to talk to them about the DEVS project and the rules of the project, which was really good and really useful, but also quite confusing, right? Because they're breaking one of the 2 rules, which is you don't invade anyone's privacy, and then the other rule is we don't look forward, which immediately I was like, well, I kind of thought that was the whole point of the project. So
yeah, the rules are a bit strange. I didn't quite, because obviously they're going to break them. That's the whole point. But I think it's like that hierarchy thing, isn't it? Because Katie wants the rest of the lower down people to know these are the things that you can't do. We're not doing them, but everybody knows they are doing them. And there's this whole sort of like weird hierarchy thing.
Well, again, it goes back to the kind of the way that Forrest's set up Amaya and DEVS to be like a cult, in that he's got these double standards of rules, which is something that cult leaders do. And they will also often have like a right-hand person who's allowed to sort of be involved in the rule breaking and is a little bit higher than the other people in this hierarchical stuff. It's all part of the same cult leader mentality.
Yeah, they really sort of position Katie as the number 2 in this episode. I felt like it comes across even more than it did in the previous episodes. But that whole sequence, I feel like the characters of Lyndon and Stuart are really good, and their sort of dynamic really came through in that sequence, because they're a couple of nerds. They're like they're sort of like different ends of the spectrum. Like, one's a lot older, one's a lot younger. Yet one of the things that they find they can use this DEVS project for is to look at low definition porn. And that's like, and then Katie makes a big thing about that. She's like, oh, you've got all of this technology, and what do you want to do with it? You want to sit and watch porn, basically.
Yeah. But, you would, wouldn't you? Marilyn Monroe.
If you got the chance.
It's Marilyn Monroe.
Like, Stuart is loving it as well, and he's like, there's nothing wrong with it. Everybody does it. It's just how people are made. But then they're just sat there just watching it. So bizarre.
What's Lyndon doing though? Isn't Lyndon just like using a computer? Is Lyndon actually watching and paying attention?
Kind of half watching it. He's not like drooling or anything like Stuart is.
Stuart's well into it.
Yeah, he's loving it. But we already know Stuart's sort of like that kind of character. Like in the previous episode when he's talking about like music and that kind of thing. And he's like, he likes popular culture. He seems more rounded as a personality and as a character. He's got more to him than some of the tech guys that you see in this.
Yeah, and he's not your stereotypical character that would be one of the greatest minds in, electronic engineering or whatever it is they're doing in DEVS.
Yeah, because a lot of people like that are a little bit withdrawn, but Stuart's the complete opposite. He's kind of like, he's quite happy to sit there and do what he wants. Clearly, he's sat there watching porn in the office, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. The rules also, there's an element of, because we kind of know those rules are going to be broken anyway, and then we do see that later on. I wonder if there's an element of like, those rules are a bit of a backup for the public. Like, the public can't know anything about DEVS, it's super top secret, but were they ever to find out, we would also want the public to know that we have these strict rules on what we're doing. We're not looking into the future. We're not invading people's privacy.
Yeah, I like this sort of like That's a really good point, because they've got to have the public face of the company, don't they? And the thing is, this is a company which is making this technology. So I think that kind of like theme comes through a lot more, because I felt like this episode, you got even more of a sense of the kind of like Silicon Valley company, the sort of campus. You got like more images of that, and you saw some of the people working there a bit more. So you kind of like, Alex Garland's really building up this image of this company and the kind of people that are working for them. And again, we said how close to the sort of present is. It does seem like somewhere you could potentially go and end up working. It's very much got that kind of like office space feel to it.
Yeah, we're getting more and more of the world around it. And I really do love that. And we talked a lot about Ex Machina when we did the last episode on this. It's really great to see this side of the company, which is only, just hinted at in Ex Machina. We spend a lot of time in Ex Machina with the Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg character, but we don't see Apple or Facebook at work. We don't see the corporate culture of it. And we're getting more and more of that in DEVS, which is a cool way of exploring a similar theme.
And talking about the sort of like the public face aspects of the company, that really comes to the forefront when Forrest has the meeting with the senator in this episode as well. What did you think about that whole exchange?
It really like brought things back down to earth, and it all felt very real. It's quite there's a real fantastical element to the plot with the central DEVS machine and what it's capable of, but that really brings it back to the real world, doesn't it? Because it's exactly what you would expect to happen to a company that had a super top secret concrete above ground bunker. Someone from the government would be zipping in and saying hello and having a word with them. And
they come in on one of the Amaya helicopters as well. And again, all the branding, like again, we talked about the branding of everything in the last episode, but there are a lot. I was noticing that a lot more now. Like all the screensavers are Forrest's daughter, so it's kind of like even the helicopters have that child face on. So it's everywhere you turn. And it does creep me out a bit.
Yeah. It would be a weird thing if you were working for that business, because presumably it's not everyone, it's public knowledge in that world that Amaya was the name of his daughter that he lost, I assume. Because why wouldn't it be? And it's interesting that she's flown in an Amaya helicopter. Forrest kind of has control over that entire sequence and that conversation and the relationship with the senator. She's representing sort of the full force of the US government there to come in and say, we've still got power over you, Forrest. You can't just do whatever you want. This is the United States of America. But she's flown in on his helicopter. Kenton's got like a weird relationship with the security guard. He's, I think, a bit jealous of Kenton, gets to do more exciting things. And Forrest is just like completely dismissive of her when they're having that conversation. He's just like, he's kind of like laying back in a chair, and he's obviously like a bit, doesn't want to be there, and he's just like going through the motions to get rid of her.
Interesting you bring up the Kenton bodyguard thing, because I know last time we talked a little bit about Kenton's past and why is he the guy in charge of security for Amaya. And you kind of get a little bit of more of a sense of his background with that, because it almost felt like him and this bodyguard, I think his name was Joe, they kind of knew each other, or they moved in the same circles previously. So I don't know if they're like some sort of ex-military or ex-secret service or something like that. You really got a sense of that, because the bodyguard, like you said, kept saying, oh, I'm jealous you get to do like interesting things. It's so boring doing these kind of like security detail jobs. He doesn't see any action. We already know Kenton is seeing lots of action. He's been in 2 massive fights in the first 2 episodes. So yeah, it was nice to sort of like get that kind of like backstory a little bit, even if it's not that coherent. You still get that sense of his past.
Yeah, he's got some experience in this field. It wasn't clear if they actually knew each other or not, or if it was a sort of professional respect that just one security guy to another, you speak the same language kind of thing. But either way, like the younger senator bodyguard, he knew that Kenton was was an OG.
And didn't he make a comment about the way they were both dressed or something? Like, I think the other bodyguard didn't like being dressed in a suit or something. But I mean, they look very different. I mean, Kenton looks like he's dressed like any other worker. Like he could be working in like a B&Q or something. Like he's just got that like weird shirt on with the Amaya logo.
Well, he looks like American college security. And they do refer to Amaya as a campus. He's got that kind of, he's not that official looking. He looks like he'd be armed with a big torch at the most. Whereas the guy with the senator, like, he looks like Secret Service. Yeah, he, like you said, he's got a suit on, he's dressed to the nines. He looks like, he actually looks like he means business. But we know that Kenton he'll get his hands dirty, and he's the one to be afraid of.
Do they actually go around in buggies, or have I made that up?
What? I can't remember.
It might just be this whole campus idea, and I've just sort of like made myself imagine it. But I can definitely see Kenton and Forrest going around in a buggy around the campus or something.
Like a golf buggy? I can't remember. I don't think so.
Maybe that'll happen in some of the other episodes. That's what I want to see. That's what I want out of DEVS.
That's your big unanswered question of DEVS, is it? Do they have golf carts?
I mean, it'd be a quicker way to get back and forth from the DEVS project.
Yeah, and they can afford it.
Yeah, just give them a little golf buggy. It'd be fine. Again, we talked about like the world building in this. We're getting more of a sense of where we are in this program. What did you think about the way she was talking about the different types of technology and how close to what we have now did you think it was?
Well, again, yeah, it really grounded it in the present. Were you surprised that she was referring to real companies? She talks about Facebook and Google, I think both of them by name, didn't she?
Yeah, and she mentioned Instagram as well. So it's like, it's definitely now.
It's very now, and it's very, very direct way of satirizing those companies, isn't it? I was quite surprised.
Yeah, because I really like the way that she described them as well. Because I know when she talked about Facebook, she said, Facebook destroys democracy. Then she said, Instagram makes you feel shit about yourself. And then she talked about AI as well, didn't she? She said, like, people are worried that 60% of jobs are going to be taken over by artificial intelligence. And the fact that's sort of in their peripherals amongst everything else was quite interesting as well. Because I remember it made me think of the... did you see that news report about Amazon using drones to deliver packages at one point?
Sure.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, it's that kind of idea that AI and different kinds of technology could potentially take away from some people's jobs, like some sort of like maybe sort of menial labor ones as well in particular, because if you've got a robot that can do stuff faster than the person, then they're going to pick the robot. So I thought that was like another interesting thing to put amongst all these other themes in this episode. Yeah,
but Forrest's like rolled his eyes at all of these concepts, hasn't he? This is what Sergei was guessing when they were heading into DEVS, and he's not interested in any of this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And you find out exactly what kind of thing Forrest is interested in a bit more in the next episode.
So Lily, what's going on with Lily in this episode? She's trying to like confide in a colleague, but she's kind of like, it seems like she's having a protracted breakdown throughout the episode. That's her kind of arc in this episode, but I thought it was really nicely done. Like where jumping to the end, I guess, I was completely fooled by what was going on in this episode. So she confides in the one colleague who tells her to go to Kenton, and then her other friend is like, oh, Lily's got this history of mental illness and all of that, and she's completely paranoid and she's got delusions. She used to have delusions. I was completely like swept up in that, and I didn't realize at all that there was going to be a massive twist. Not a massive twist, but I thought it was really well played.
I thought it was a bit too sudden because suddenly they were just like, oh, Lily has a past history of schizophrenia. And I just felt like that was such a mad thing to just put in the episode and not have any sort of clues previously. I kept going like, wow, this is really quick. They've just suddenly plonked that in there. So part of me was like, okay, maybe this isn't quite right. But they did lots of interesting things with it. Like when she's talking to Kenton, and sort of like saying like, oh, I've been having panic attacks, blah, blah, blah. And she basically has a panic attack in that meeting. When she talks about, she goes on a rant about her ex-boyfriend's tattoo with the dragon scales and seeing patterns and things like that. I almost thought that could be something which becomes relevant later. So she can see patterns and she can see ways of doing things. And the idea that she's like got that kind of attention to detail could become relevant when it comes to the DEVS project. But that all turns out to be a crock of shit because she's just lying in order to steal something from Kenton's office.
It totally fooled me, though. I was completely wrapped up in it. And what I was thinking was, this is such a great, this is a great twist in itself, that this awful conspiracy is happening to her. And she is also someone who suffered from paranoid delusions in the past. I thought that would be an incredible, like, extra layer to it. And the frustration that you would feel if you were someone who'd had that difficulty in your past, and then you really were wrapped up in a paranoid conspiracy. And what's the phrase, like, it's not paranoia if they're really out to get you. That's what I was thinking at that point. She's in that kind of a situation. She's living that. And her friend doesn't believe her, and who can she turn to, and all of this. But she uses it as an excuse to just fake a suicide attempt. So she leaves Kenton's office, and then the next thing you know, she's like standing up on that ledge. And I can't remember how it played out. I think it's during that scene, isn't it, that Kenton goes out, and then her friend starts messing around with Kenton's computer, and that's actually the first time when you get proper confirmation. If you're not as dumb as me, you get confirmation of what's actually going on, that her friend was in on it all the time, and it's just a big scam they're putting.
I think that's the best way of watching it, though. The fact that you do get swept up in that lie that she's telling. That's how Alex Garland would have wanted you to enjoy that episode. The kind of signifiers for me, which made me think something's going on. So do you remember the breakout space that they've got? These, like, so again, you see the offices, and when Lily goes in for like a meeting, and they're all sat on like comfy seats, and it's all really quirky, and like we've all been to those kind of office spaces where they've got those breakout spaces. So when that's happening, Lily's friend is looking at her laptop, and she's kind of like looking at what's going on with Lily. So it's like she's almost checking in to see what's happening over there, like there's something else going on.
Like, that's before she's made any comment about her Lily's past, isn't it?
Yeah, so and then that happens afterwards, and then they have that conversation, all this kind of stuff. So it almost seems a bit of a setup, but I couldn't work it out.
But it's set up so well because it works for both instances. She could be watching, thinking, there's my friend that used to have paranoid delusions. I need to keep an eye on her. She's a bit unhinged. Or there's my friend setting up the lie about the paranoid delusions. It's my cue in a second to drop in and play my role.
So all of this panic attack stuff leads Forrest and Kenton to think that they've got something over Lily at this point, which I thought was another sort of interesting part of the puzzle, because not only were they using that sort of faked almost suicide attempt where she jumps onto the ledge as a distraction so they could get this video footage of Sergei's death. It also turns out that sort of like idea of her having potentially schizophrenia is something that Forrest and Kenton think they can use to keep her in line. And I thought that was another interesting layer that they'd put in there.
And presumably that's Lily's plan, right? She wants them to think that they've got more of an upper hand than they do, while she's secretly uncovering information about them.
Yeah, I think so, because at this point she knows something's up. She knows there's more to this story than they're letting on.
And it's to her advantage to let them think she's crazy, basically. She wants that. So I watched these two episodes back to back, so I'm kind of getting them jumbled up in my head. But I know that this episode ended with an amazing scene from Lily's ex-boyfriend. Yeah. So her friend has snuck around and sort of hacked or whatever, downloaded something from Kenton's computer while Kenton's distracted by Lily's supposed manic episode. They then take that to Jamie, who has been an absolute hero of the series so far. What does he do? He like uploads the footage, and then they've got the actual footage of Sergei's death, and they're going to rewatch it.
But it's interesting how he does it as well, because he opens a cupboard and he's got like 10 laptops or something, all just in this cupboard. He pulls one out, takes out the Wi-Fi connection, and then he's like, right, now we're safe. There's no surveillance on this. I really like that aspect to it as well. But
yeah, why doesn't Jamie work for Amaya? He seems to be much more of a whiz kid than Lily is.
Yeah, he's obviously just like one of these cool hacker guys who just stays below the radar.
Yeah, with his kind of gross beard.
His beard is hilarious. It's so wispy, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks stuck on. But he's super cool. So they play the footage, and it's really intense. But by playing it back, and it's horrible to watch. It was horrible to watch the first time, and it's horrible to watch again. But then Jamie's like watching it and skipping back, and he's spotting what's wrong with it. And I thought that scene was so well done. So what does he see in the flames that tips him off?
Well, he sees that the flames are moving at the same sort of frame, so they're making the same movement, which flames would all do their own thing.
Copy and paste job.
Yeah, it made me think of Photoshop, which I've been using a lot for work at the moment.
Yeah, what I loved about it was very high tech, but also incredibly simple, so that an audience can just once you're shown the trick. It's like, oh yeah, it is fake. I see how it's been faked, rather than like, you could have done something with, I looked at the code and the code reveals that 2 edits were made after the recording. That it was a cool visual way of demonstrating it that was very simple, but also made it look quite high tech. I loved it.
And like that revelation for them completely changes their whole outlook on the situation. They know that Sergei was killed and this has been covered up, and it's been covered up by Amaya. It's not been covered up by this sort of like these Russian spies that they thought were the bad guys in the first one. They're finding out that this corporation that Lily's working for is potentially very bad news.
Yeah, but of course at this point, the Russians are kind of out of the picture, I guess.
Also, I was thinking about, I know we talked about when Sergei was looking at that laptop in the first episode and sort of like, what did he see? So I was thinking about that again, and I think I might have been wrong with what I thought about initially, because I thought it was just because he was panicky because of what he'd seen. It could just be that he was doing corporate espionage and he was really stressed out about that, and that's the reason he panicked and ran out. Like, was it that, or was it what he saw?
Yeah, well, he may well have seen his own death.
Could be.
I don't know what you can actually see on the computer code, though, because there is a difference between the code and the big screen that interprets the code and shows you a visual of the past, present, future. So I don't know.
And in that case, did he break the rule as soon as he went in there and looked at the future?
Possibly.
Who knows? Wild speculation.
Let's get on to episode 4 then.
I'm just scared.
Of what?
Us.
They're gonna kill me.
She's a highly intelligent young woman.
Stop the car!
I'm afraid not.
You shouldn't be watching this. Stop seeing them as a tech company. See them as the mob.
So I absolutely loved the intro for this episode. It was really good.
Yeah, we've got another crazy montage, but it's much more striking and psychedelic this time, isn't it?
Yeah. So it starts with each of the characters. It starts with Lyndon. It's got a sort of like close-up of Lyndon, Katie, Stuart, and Forrest, and they're all in different colours. So it's red, green, and blue, which obviously are all the primary colours, but they're also the colours you use for video signals. So like an RGB cable is red, green, and blue. And I know Alex Garland did a similar sort of like colour aesthetic when he was doing Ex Machina. I think there was lots of that kind of color in there. So to see that again at the beginning, I like geeked out a bit and was like, this is great.
All right, nice.
So yeah, so they've got all of that happening.
It's also if you compare to the last one, if I can make more wild speculations about what these intro sequences mean, as opposed to episode 3 that starts with completely garbled, jumbled up messages that are quite hard to read visually and it's mostly just static. There's much more clarity now. There's a layer of clarity, and the events of this episode do go into clarity being applied to the devs projections, right? So I don't know if there's something there about how the beginning of the episode is a lot more clear, although we do then get into projections that are very unclear within that montage.
Well, that works because like using that kind of cable for a video signal makes it clearer because you're differentiating between the different signals and stuff. So I think you're right. That is a strong interpretation of it. And then so they had all of those close-ups and then they had a dead rat. What did you think about that?
Very on the nose metaphor. It reminded me of there's an episode of The Simpsons that parodies The Departed, and in the end they do the shot of the rat from the end of The Departed, and then Ralph sticks his head up from a bin and says the rat symbolizes obviousness. But I don't mind it.
Yeah.
Dead rat. Someone's going to rat and someone's going to die.
Yeah. That's basically what it was. And I was just like, okay, so it's probably Lily, isn't it? Lily's probably the dead rat. But part of me was like, maybe that dead rat, there will be... Because so you know in the episode 2, when you said they were jumping forward and you saw bits of what happens in the episode, I was like, okay, so maybe a rat's going to get into the devs building in this episode and then die. And then maybe they're just going to show that now.
Yeah, well, that would actually make more sense because I don't think the devs machine is designed to work in metaphors, is it? I think if it shows you something, you expect it to be showing you what's going to happen. Whether you interpret that wrongly, that's another matter, but you should be seeing an actual image of something real.
So they jump from this this amazing intro sequence into the actual devs building again, and then I think it's Lyndon and Stuart and Katie are all sort of chatting about this potential earthquake or something that's happening, because you find out
there is a minor quake, isn't there? There's a small quake.
Yeah, because an alarm's going off, isn't it, in the building, and they're all sort of quite casual about it, and that's when you kind of find out a bit more about Katie potentially breaking the rules, because they established that the building's built on a fault line, so there could be an earthquake at any time. And then Stuart kind of implies that Katie's already seen the future, so she knows if the earthquake's going to happen or not. So that's why she's so calm about it and carries on with her job. Do you think that that's going to be a bit of foreshadowing for something that will happen later on? Do you think there'll be a big earthquake and the devs building will go to pieces?
I kind of did. It was a big... it was a load of peril to just dump in to not do something with later. But then the thing with Katie, using it as an excuse to show that Katie's breaking the rules, or that Stuart expects Katie to break the rules, that's doing something with it in itself, isn't it?
Either way, it kind of works in both ways. I'm still interested to see if there will be some sort of earthquake. I can see that happening in like the final episode, and it's all just going to shit. Yeah,
that would be a cool way to end it. I think they do need to do something else with it, because just using it to show that Katie breaks the rules is not quite enough, because immediately after this scene, she goes next door where Forrest is breaking the rules, and they talk about breaking the rules. Yeah,
definitely. And that debate's really good as well, that whole sort of scene with Forrest and Katie and sort of what they're talking about. So Forrest says this line. What does he say? He says something about they're living in a physical, not a magical universe.
But they're magicians.
Yeah, but they're magicians. And this made me think about the whole sort of like religion versus science debate. Because basically he's saying they're kind of like magicians because of what they do with their science. Whereas in religion, there's lots of like crazy things which could be called as magic, like a lot of the stories about Jesus and things like that, fantastical things that happen. But if there was a scientific explanation about them, would that make him a magician or a scientist? I don't know if that's kind of like clasping at straws there, but do you kind of see what I mean with like the magician religion thing?
Yeah, it's a bit of a trope, isn't it? Is there there's a quote, I think it might be Arthur C. Clarke. It's any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Basically saying that I think it's more from a writer's perspective, and my interpretation of it is like, as a writer, don't get hung up on how magical your sci-fi is, I guess.
Yeah, because if you've got a scientific explanation for it, then you can kind of get away with it.
I think so.
Yeah, to a degree, it becomes this whole sort of like science fiction, science fantasy debate.
And I guess he's making a greater sort of philosophical point as well about how humans interact with and understand technology, and maybe just write it off as magic.
Yeah, exactly. And he's sort of like, we've already said that he's kind of like positioning himself as almost a god, in the fact that he wants to be able to look at these things in perfect clarity and know what's going to happen and know what the tram lines are, because he's very, very sort of like insistent about the cause and effect idea. So if like it's already happened, so you can't change it. And then they talk about this, so Katie makes the point that, well, I don't know if it's Katie or Forrest, they make a point about if they saw 10 seconds in the future and then Katie knew that she had her hands out of her pockets, then she wouldn't do it. And then would that change the course of time, change the course of history? It's this weird idea as well. What did you think about that? I know I'm not explaining it very well at all, but I feel like it's quite a concept. It's quite a complex thing to get your head around.
Yeah, well, Forrest is really troubled by it, I think. I got the impression that he's a bit upset by the idea that it might be possible to do that, because he's really fixated on these tram lines, that they're a big deal for him, and he's troubled by the idea that they, because of this thing they've created, they can completely break those tram lines, or what would happen if they did break them. And Katie's just like, she just doesn't seem fussed. She's just like, it's not possible. It wouldn't happen. It's just not possible to do that. And that's when he asks her to do this whole fold your arms, put your hands in your pocket or whatever thing, which she just doesn't really engage with it. She's just like, she just sort of stands there. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah, so it's almost, so as much as Forrest wants to prove that, or seemingly wants to prove that you can't change these tram lines, he's worried that you actually can.
Do you think that he would just feel so guilty over Amaya's death if it was possible to change the tram lines? So if the tram lines are rigid and set, then his daughter would always die when she died, and there was absolutely nothing he could have done differently because everything's completely deterministic. Do you think what's troubling him there is, if you can change the tram lines, then I could have done something differently and my daughter wouldn't be dead?
That's a really good point. And yeah, I think that's definitely something that could be going through his head at the time, because yeah, he just wants to prove absolutely it wasn't his fault. Maybe. We don't know how his daughter died yet, but that's a really, really strong observation, that.
And I wonder if it will be like something that like a car crash or something where he was driving, or I don't know, as opposed to like she got a disease that is completely, random and there was nothing that could have been done.
Because we still don't know why he is so obsessed with this particular project and what he wants to do with it.
Well, I think that we don't know what he wants to do with it, no, but it's already given him the ability to look at like a real-time video of his deceased daughter. So in terms of what he wants from it, he may want more, but that's enough motivation, I think, to lead a billionaire to develop this device, right?
Yeah, but I still feel like there's still some particular reason he wants it to be exactly the way he wants it.
So what is the thing that they're watching that's got Forrest so upset, basically? He's seeing a projection of someone with short dark hair, and he's making this point to Katie, saying, the tram lines are the tram lines. And I think he closes it off by saying, Lily's going to die in 48 hours because I've seen this projection. And he's sad about that. He doesn't want her to die. I think he is a bit guilty about Sergei, and he knows that Lily is not a Russian spy. So he doesn't want her to die, but he also fully believes in the tram lines.
So we know at this point that Lily is going to die. And I think the next scene you see after this is Lily saying, they're going to kill me.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really nice cut.
I was straight away a bit skeptical, though. I'd already had this thought in episode 2 that the projection might not work properly because things didn't work out the way I expected with Kenton and the Russian guy. And Lily's the main character, right? And it's not a clear projection. And we know that there's another character with the same like body type as Lily and the same haircut in this limited set of characters that we have. It's like, it's like a Scooby-Doo episode. Like, if it's not the guy who if it's not the main suspect, it's going to be the guy who owns the spooky park. Like, I know that we've had a lot of people die that I wasn't expecting already in 4 episodes, but I was like, I really don't think we're going to kill off Lily. She is the main character at this point. And Forrest is just so certain of it. Like, Lily's going to die in 48 hours. I was like, oh, okay, well, we'll see about that. That doesn't sound right. I didn't click straight away, but we'll talk about it more. But Lyndon becomes a really big character in this episode. And as soon as Lyndon became a big character, I was like, oh, we're focusing on Lyndon quite a lot, and Lyndon actually looks quite a bit like Lily. I think Lyndon's for the chop, to be honest.
Interesting. Because I was sure that was Lily in that sort of projection. But then you're right, like, I don't think they can't kill her off. And I keep thinking maybe Lily's going to be the one to prove that the tram lines aren't set or something like that. And then maybe she'll find a way around it, or there's something that... I think whatever happens, Lily is going to do something that's important to the project, because that feels like the natural progression to the story. At least at this point for me.
Well, something has to happen with... If Lily doesn't die in 48 hours, Forrest has to reevaluate how he interacts with DEVS, right? So if Lyndon then dies, then Forrest can say, okay, DEVS works, but I was reading it wrong. But he has to acknowledge that he's reading it wrong, and that's important in itself, isn't it? And that's why Lily's so important, I think. That's Lily's contribution to DEVS, making Forrest realise it either doesn't work, or it doesn't work the way he thinks it works, or he's not read the user manual properly.
Lily now knows that Sergei was killed by the company. She knows that having this information could mean that Amaya is going to kill her as well. So they have this debate about whether to go to the police or not. And Jamie's just like, go to the police. That's what you got to do. Lily's like, no, we can't go to the police. We can't do that. And what would you do in that situation? Because I was a bit confused by because basically what happens is she goes, no, can't call the police. They'll kill me. And then later on in the episode, she calls the police.
I think she feels like she's got nowhere else to turn. But I feel like I would call the police. But she makes a very good point, which is she compares them to the mob. And she says, would you call the police on the mob? And it's a valid point. Like, she's seen the power and control that Amaya has, that they can just like kill somebody and just get away with it. They've already done it. So her life is similarly, on the line there.
The mob comparison is really good. I mean, yeah, I don't think I'd call the police on the mob if they knew where I lived. And if I'd been working for them as well, Yeah. Not the best call. But yeah, and then, so what happens after that? She's been staying the night at Jamie's, and she goes home, and then Kenton's there. And Kenton is talking to the homeless guy, my favourite character, who appears in it every once in a while.
I think you're right about him in terms of he's going to do more. He's important in some way, because his interaction with Kenton is great. He's like... I can't remember who says it, I think he says, "I'm not scared of you," and Kenton's like, "I know," or does Kenton say, "You're not scared of me"?
I think he says, so the homeless guy says, "I'm not scared of you."
Yeah, and Kenton's like, "Yeah, I know. That's interesting. Oh, I don't know why."
But yeah, so he's basically covering for Lily, and he says, so then he goes back to the sign which says "fuck you" on her window, and he says, "I think that's for you," and I quite like that as well.
Yeah, but of course it wasn't for him. It was
It's for the Russian guy.
For the Russians, yeah.
As soon as he sees Lily as well, he goes, "Stranger danger."
Yeah. But she does go with him despite this stranger danger because, again, it's the mob and she's trying to play a bit of a role, isn't she? Because she doesn't want to get killed.
So Kenton basically says, "You've got to come to this psychiatrist because you've said you've got schizophrenia. So we're going to take you there. You tried to kill yourself yesterday. We're going to make sure you're all right." And she's kind of like, "Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm fine." Yeah, doesn't believe any of that. So they go to the psychiatrist. And I thought this bit was really interesting as well because the psychiatrist is clearly trying to get more out of Lily, but she's very tricksy about what she's telling him. So that was, again, her sort of like knowing what's up and sort of like manipulating the way things are going.
Yeah, I didn't trust the psychiatrist. We've been watching Mad Men, which has a subplot where Don's wife... Don sends his wife to see a psychiatrist, and then the psychiatrist just calls Don up every evening after the appointment and tells him everything they talked about. So I was like, yeah, don't talk to this psychiatrist, Lily. He's trouble.
Yeah, and to make it even worse, like Kenton is really blatant about it because as soon as she comes out of the room, he goes, "I'm just going to go in there for a second," asks the psychiatrist what happened, and comes back out. And surely Lily knows that he's just asking what happened.
I think she does because she was sly about it, careful with what she said to the psychiatrist. She knows what's going on, and yeah, she was not surprised at all. I think, but that makes it quite tense and scary, doesn't it? Because she knows what's going on, and Kenton's like, he's really sly as well. He can probably tell that she knows. Everyone knows. Like, and it's just a case of like, well, if everyone knows everything, who's going to get killed first?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is how we get to that amazing scene on the highway.
Yeah, the car crash moment. So Lily like manages to get the wheel off of Kenton, who is being a bit sort of weird and evil again, saying like, "Oh, I think you've really got these problems. I'm going to take you here. I'm not going to take you home." And that causes her to panic. They swerve into the side of the road, and there's that moment when Lily gets out of that car, and then that car almost kills her. That was like I literally went, shit, as soon as that car almost hit her. Because imagine that, if she'd got out of that car crash moment and then just got run over, and then this is what Forrest was seeing, this car crash, and she was crawling out from the car crash. That could have been...
Is that what you thought?
That could have been what had happened. But
of course,
none of it happened, and she managed to get away, which was great.
You're still thinking at this point that the projection definitely was Lily and the projection is proven wrong?
Well, potentially. I wasn't sure because that could still be another moment, but it kind of looked, in the projection, it kind of looked like grass. So I feel like...
I thought it was snow.
But then it's
that's
all
just because
white.
the whole thing was grey, yeah.
Yeah. So I, like, in my head, that was just outside the DEVS building. And she's crawling outside of the DEVS building. But I don't know if that's because I've already got this idea of a big earthquake in the finale and there's lots of destruction and Lily's crawling away from something. That's what's in my head. Yeah.
This is not the way to my apartment.
We're not going to your apartment.
Stop the car. Now.
Can't do that.
Stop the fucking car.
I'm afraid not.
So Lily's had all this crazy stuff with the psychiatrist. She's had this incredibly intense plot line. Meanwhile, we need to talk about what Lyndon's been doing in the DEVS project, 'cause it's really confusing. I didn't really understand it. I feel like I need you to explain it to me because you know more about like sound engineering and stuff. So he's done some sort of algorithm to tidy up the audio so they can hear Jesus speak or people speaking Aramaic in the crucifixion scene.
Yeah. From what I could gather, I mean, he talks about lots of different kind of like theories, and I'm sure it all makes perfect sense if you know about that kind of science. Didn't really to me, but he talks about like this multiverse theory. So he basically changes the theory that they've been using all of their algorithms with, and he gives it this other theory, like the multiverse theory. So anything that can happen will happen. So there's lots of different alternatives. So by doing that, he's able to get a clear sound recording from the past of what Jesus was saying in that video they keep looking back on from the project. And they hear him speaking like Aramaic from like 2,000 years ago. And it's really clear because he talks about when you look at the visuals, it looks like a blizzard or the inside of a beanbag, as I said last episode. He refers to it as a blizzard of variances. So it's being able to be like, right, so these are the different variants in that sound recording. If there are infinite variants, then we can kind of pick and choose and clear up the audio. That's kind of what I got from it. I could be making up a lot of bullshit, but how does that sound as an idea?
I don't know, man. I completely didn't understand why the audio proved the multiverse theory. I got really lost at that point. But Lyndon was like, Forrest was really upset by it. He was not happy with the multiverse.
He's like, yeah, he's cleared it up, but it could be wrong. And that's his main issue.
So he fires Lyndon over this. He's so upset that he fires Lyndon. This is where I'm thinking Lyndon's going to die. This is where it's really confirmed for me. Yeah, I just couldn't keep track with why Forrest was so upset about the multiverse thing. Well, no, I could keep track with that, sorry. He's upset by the idea that the Amaya that he's looking at might not be his Amaya, which I do understand. But I just didn't follow why why he was suddenly convinced of a multiverse.
I think it's because the technology that Lyndon's using implies that it could be lots of different alternatives. It may not be exactly what happened, but it's as close as they can get. So even though it's crystal clear audio, there might be a slight variant in it because it's got this multiverse theory. So it could be a different Jesus from a different like potential alternative universe. So what Forrest is kind of saying is if they keep doing it, they'll just get further and further away from what they want. And what they want is perfect accuracy. They want to look back and then have the exact audio, see the exact picture of what happened back then. So if they're doing this thing where it's slight variables still, it's not what he wants. He wants no variables, 100% accuracy, or else what's the point? And he calls it like a cute party trick, doesn't he? Which I really enjoyed. And he says, all of you guys have got nerd hard-ons over this. And it just made me think back to the other episode previously when they were sat all watching porn. So it's kind of like this recurring thing.
But he really changes his tune, doesn't he? Because Katie uses the same theory behind what Lyndon did to change the video as well. So they've got this perfect clarity on the audio. She's applying it to the video as well. And again, I got a bit lost. I didn't really understand it. And even then I was thinking like, that was so confusing and complicated with the audio stuff. And you're telling me you just pop the same thing on the video and it worked perfectly. But whatever, go along with it. And she gives him a perfect crystal clear video of Amaya. And I think he's changing his tune a bit there on the multiverse.
Because it's like a 4K projection, isn't it? I've upped it to 4K rather than 1080p after you scolded me last time for saying it was out of date. Yeah, so he's looking at this lovely picture of Amaya. But then it's still like, in his head, it might not be 100% accurate, even though it looks great. He's still thinking it's not exactly what I want from the project. But
was he?
Well, you can't really tell, but he's more just happy that he can see her, and he's crying because he's emotional about it because he can see his daughter. But I don't know if he's still kind of like, if he's not quite there yet.
I don't know. I mean, he was just so moved by it. I thought he's signed up now. Bring on the multiverse. Have you seen Fringe?
Yeah.
So it reminded me of that. You know that that was another ridiculously confusing storyline over a much longer period, but massive fringe spoiler incoming. In that, it turned out that Peter was from the alternate universe and Walter had brought him back in like a fit of grief because he went over to the other universe to try and cure him after his own Peter had died, and then he ends up bringing him back.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that with Fringe. That was like a really, like you said, it's quite a convoluted bit of the storyline, but it worked really well. And I was quite shocked when I found out.
Yeah. But if we're going to go into alternate worlds, then maybe Forrest can get his daughter back from an alternate reality. But I don't think that's what DEVS does. You know, I don't think we can reach into these alternate worlds.
Nah, and like Forrest's whole thing is like he wants to prove that there's no other choice. Things are the way they are. So having a multiverse where things can be anything that you want, anything you can imagine has happened, that's not going with Forrest's sort of like belief system. So complicated. But I love it. Like, I love all of this stuff. And if you put it down to layman's terms, they got a good sound recording, wasn't what he wanted. Got a good video recording, still wasn't what he wanted. What does this man want? That's what we want to know.
So the very last thing that happens then is a massive cliffhanger for us. I've been wanting to watch episode 5, but I really didn't want to get ahead before we recorded this. She gets arrested. So she calls the police, right? Does she call the police? Yeah, she calls the police, but then they come around, arrest her, and surprise, surprise, the mob have the police in their pocket.
And then Kenton goes into the back with Jamie, which is a bit dodgy.
So Jamie's dead, right?
I hope not. It looks that way though, doesn't it?
It was interesting that we didn't see Jamie die, and if people die, this show is not afraid to show us them dying.
Yeah.
But
I feel like Jamie's too big of a character for him not to show his death. I think they're going to have to explain that in the next episode.
that's why I wanted to watch it.
I don't know, but Kenton's going to do something to Jamie, surely. Like, he wants...
Kenton had him by the throat and was like forcing him across his own living room. People don't survive Kenton grabbing them by the throat, right? That's the issue.
But then Kenton will want to know what he knows. So are we going to get some sort of like interrogation thing or something like that?
Well, I can't wait. I really want to know what
I'm
happens.
excited. So what's happened so far? What are the headlines for these 2 episodes?
Mad Billionaire has a secret development wing of his company where he is looking into the past to possibly look into the future. Killed one of the developers who was a spy for the Russians. His girlfriend Lily is unraveling that and has proven that they faked the death, meaning they killed him. And she's got arrested for her trouble.
I want to know if we're going to see Lyndon again. Like you said. Because he's left the company now. He's got his $10 million separation check. Well done. You've done well with that. But is he going to pop back in? Who knows? I was sad that him and Stuart aren't going to be together, having their sort of like buddy dynamic.
And that conversation between him and Stuart strongly implied that he wasn't just going to be able to just walk away into the sunset with his $10 million. That's why I think he's going to die.
Stuart said, "You've got to go now." He said, "You need to understand, they will kill you if you fuck about with this. So just go, have a lovely life, and forget about the DEVS project." But we're not doing any of that. We're going to be back again talking about the next episodes of DEVS very soon. So keep a lookout for that next episode. Are you excited for more DEVS? I mean, you've pretty much said you are already, Matt.
I'm on the edge of my seat, James. I need to see episode 5.
We're doing this for a Zoom call, and literally Matt's face was full of so much excitement. It was mad. So I can tell he's very, very excited for more DEVS.
So we're going to bring you another episode of this mini-series on episodes 5 and 6 of DEVS next week. We're also going to try and get another episode of our space series to you next week. It's going to be our first lockdown episode of the space series, so that's exciting and interesting.
Yep, definitely. So look out for those. As always, if you want to chat to us, we are on all the social media sites. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We've got a website. The website is journeythroughsci-fi.com. You can find us at Through Sci-Fi Pod or at Through Sci-Fi on all the social medias. So reach out, let us know what you're thinking. Let us know if there's anything you want to hear us talk about, what you think of the episodes. We would love to hear from you guys.
Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.